And welcome back to Hannity. So the National Review has obtained an internal email from Al Jazeera English executive Carlos Van Meek. Now, its contents are very shocking. In the email, Van Meek, you know, he's responsible for establishing Al Jazeera America. That's the network that was purchased from Al Gore. Well, he's allegedly instructing his employees not to use the words Islamist, jihad, extremist, or even, get this, the word terrorist in any reporting, because according to Van Meek, and I quote, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. Now, we reached out to Al Jazeera English for a statement. In return, they provided us with a video which was put together back in November detailing what they call the, quote, Al Jazeera style guide. Watch this clip.
We don't use the labels Islamist, for example, or extremist. We usually let the group's actions speak for themselves. We don't give that group a particular label.
We found ourselves referring to Boko Haram and the Muslim Brotherhood using the same catch-all phrase, Islamist, and we felt that wasn't appropriate.
Here with reaction, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim's fight to save his faith, Zuhdi Jasser, Fox News military analyst. Colonel Bill Cowan is with us. Zuhdi, Dr. Jasser, I guess this is probably the perfect network. When Obama retires, he could work there, because he doesn't like to use these terms either, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the network that's basically the Pravda of the new Cold War, which is against the evil empire of the Islamic States or the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And they have that style guide because why? They want to keep the giant in the West, those that advocate for liberty, which is really the only strategy against the global jihad, is to advocate against liberty and against political Islam. They want to keep it silent. They want to invocate censorship. And their Muslim Brotherhood operatives, which is really what Al Jazeera is all about, want to spread their ideas and keep us in the dark. They don't want to mobilize Muslims like our organization against Islamic reform, which is really what we need.
All right, the world, Colonel Cowan, is cowering before radical Islamists. Now, they won't even use the term on certain news organizations. The White House won't use the term. How do radical Islamists interpret that? Because I'm assuming they interpret that as that we are weak and that we're afraid and that America, that they're succeeding. This to me would embolden somebody.
I think so, Sean. It looks like Al Jazeera got the White House playbook when it comes to how you designate people. And clearly, I think it's a disservice to all peace-loving Muslims, which the majority of Muslims are. Dr. Jasser knows, and he speaks so eloquently about this, as incidentally does President al-Sisi. The fact of the matter is, when we don't clearly identify who these bad guys are, we give the opportunity for all Muslims to be painted with the same brush, and it's simply not so. And the bad guys, the Islamists, the fundamentalists, the terrorists, the radicals, whatever we want to call them, they have to be relishing the fact that we don't clearly identify exactly who they are.
All right, General Mattis and General Keane both testified on Capitol Hill yesterday, and they used a map actually showing the expansion of radicalism in Africa, the Middle East, and I think a pretty strong argument could be made that, you know, pretty much every continent now is being impacted by radical Islam. There's the map there in the spread of Islam. Radical Islamists, obviously that includes ISIS in Iraq and in Syria. And here's what the generals had to say specifically about that threat of radical Islam.
Violent jihadist terrorists cannot be permitted to take refuge behind false religious garb and leave us unwilling to define this threat with the clarity it deserves.
Radical Islam, as much as Nazism and communism, both geopolitical movements, ideologically driven, were the major security challenges of the 20th century. Islam is the major security challenge of our generation. U.S. policymakers refuse to accurately name the movement as radical Islam. We further choose not to define it, nor explain its ideology. And most critical, we have no comprehensive strategy to stop it or defeat it.
Dr. Jasser, if he's right, General Keane, and this is the major challenge of our generation, can we compare this to the twisted, sick, evil ideology of fascism, Nazism, communism? Is it the same thing? Is there any difference?
it's even worse, because the pool from which this radical ideology dips from is 1.5 billion people, which is a quarter of the world's population, which is my faith. And if you want to mobilize, we need a president who can exert leadership to say, hey, has a vision for what is victory. And victory would be the advancement of liberty, the protection of things like the Green Revolution, the revolutions in Egypt. There was an Arab awakening that was happening, and this president has been asleep with no strategy, and that's allowed that vacuum to be filled by radical and political Islam. So we see the rise of Islamic states and the defeat of our true allies, which are liberals on the ground.
Colonel Cowan, let me just sort of dovetail into another question. So Speaker Boehner invites Bibi Netanyahu. The White House gets angry. Now we have White House political operatives now going to Israel to work against Bibi in his upcoming March campaign, March election. Is that all because that they don't want somebody pointing out that the deal they're negotiating with Iran and the mullahs of Iran is a bad deal, and that this is A squared, B squared, C squared, radical Islamists with nuclear weapons equal potential human destruction?
Yeah, I don't think there's any belief in the State Department either, Sean, or the White House, that the Iranians really are trying to build a nuclear weapon.
Of course,
whereas anybody who looks at it carefully and closely, including Europeans, know that, in fact, they are trying to do that. I think this president would do anything he could to undermine Benjamin Netanyahu, just like they're trying to do anything they can to undermine President al-Sisi in Egypt, who would like to be our biggest partner, who would like to be involved with us in the coalition against ISIS and others, and who we continuously
with the
stab in the
Muslim
back
Brotherhood
at every opportunity.
at the White House, the people that
Absolutely,
want him
Sean.
deposed.
Today, the State Department is acknowledging and meeting with certain Brotherhood operatives, and there's no strategy at all. What they're forgetting, even Iran, the eschatology, the end of times of the Khomeinists, they believe that the ushering in of the 12th Imam is the end of time, and yet we're negotiating with that type
General
of
Sisi,
force.
I hope and pray that I'm wrong. He may give his life for standing up to radical Islamists as probably one of the bravest figures in this century. For having the courage to do what he did back in January. All right,
I
guys.
will say he
Sean, I had the
identified
chance
the
to meet
problem.
him.
Go ahead.
I met him a year and a half ago, Sean. I was fortunate enough to be on a trip over there. He's a very, very impressive man. He was the first one who said, we have a real problem with the Muslim Brotherhood, with extremists. We all have to work together to fight them. Instead of our government sidling up with him and fighting him, we're doing everything we can to undermine him.
All right, Zuhdi, Jasser, we'll give you the next word next time. I promise. The last word next time. I got to roll.